Hi, I'm Terry Butchie from the Ohio State University's Math Literacy Initiative. We're going to do some sessions on critical areas of focus, and we'll spend spend each week on a different grade level. So this week we're going to talk about the critical areas of focus for kindergarten, what they are. In Ohio, and it doesn't matter if you live in Ohio or don't live in Ohio, but Ohio has on their Ohio Department of Education a really nice resource that points to the critical areas of focus for each grade level, which means when your student, because we're talking about kindergarten right now, it means when your student or your child finishes kindergarten, these are the things that they really need to have a good foundation on, so that they can continue to be successful in mathematics. So this is taken right from the Ohio Department of Education website. So it talks a little bit about what critical areas of focus are. It's really intended to be a tool for teachers. Parents could look at it too, but the nice thing for teachers is that when it pulls out each of these critical areas, you can see how the standards fit together and work off of each other as your student or child learns the different topics in mathematics that they're supposed to. So I'm going to scoot down to kindergarten, and this is video 3 on the first critical area in kindergarten. So the first critical area of focus in kindergarten is representing and comparing whole numbers initially through sets of objects. I have 2 videos already that are on counting and cardinality, and then the second one on operations and algebraic thinking. So today, the rest of this session is going to focus on number and operations in base 10, and then on measurement and data. So what that means is that on this critical area, which is representing and comparing whole numbers, there are these other 2 subsets that we have to really make sure that our students have some experiences with and have kind of a firm handle on. And if not, you can work with your student. If you're a parent or a sibling or a guardian, you can work with your student this summer to get them ready. That's students that are coming out of kindergarten so that they can be prepared for their first grade classroom. So let's talk about this a little bit. So we have number and operations in base 10, working with numbers 11 through 19 to gain the foundations that they need for place value. Place value is an incredibly important task or idea that we want our students to really have a good grasp on. So we'll do a few activities so that you can have some to do with your student at home. We try to use as many just household items as we can in these videos, just so you don't have to have a whole array of fancy pants tools to be able to do this. But this first idea in this particular subset of the critical area is one of the most important. Now, we've talked many in my videos before about the use of a 10 frame. My favorite tactile, that means something you can handle and hold on to. 10 frame is just a egg carton where you cut the last 2 off. So you do want to make sure your child knows that this is not a complete egg carton, because they do need to know that 12 is in a dozen. But this is one of my favorite tools to use. So what we need to know for this particular task is they need to be able to understand that when we get into those numbers that go beyond 10, that there's something special about those numbers. Numbers that go beyond 10 have something special about them. And it's cool if they figure out that special thing. It would be nice if our numbering system helped us, but so when you get to the 20s, it's like 21, 22, 23. So you still have that same prefix, and then the second number is the 1 digit. Makes perfect sense. The problem is in our language, from 10 to 20, it's not that intuitive. So you would think it would be 10-1, 10-2, or 10-1, or 10-2, but it's not. It's 11, 12, 13, 14. So these are, it's not as intuitive, and it's not as intuitive in an earlier frame. So those two things kind of work against us when we're working with kindergartners. But one thing to do is just to find some counters of, and again, I'm using just counters that I have. So I don't even know how many counters there are here, but I'm going to try to figure it out. So if I'm working with a kindergarten, I would first ask how many red counters do you have? See how they count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So if they can count them, they can touch each of them. They can make sure they're saying only one number when they touch them. And the last number that they touch, they say the number 12. They know that that set, then, this collection of items is 12. That's cool. That hits a lot of the critical areas of focus for kindergarten. Now we want to know that they know what this means. And you're like, what does 12 mean? What do you mean? What does 12 mean? But let's think about what we want our kindergartners to know that 12 means. So we want them to know that it means that there's this really important kind of set, which is 10, and some extras. So we could, because you will have used this tool before with them, you could say, okay, well, do we have enough? One question could be, do we have enough of the red counters to fill up our set of, how many is in this again? And again, curiosity. You want to be curious so they can tell you, oh, that's silly. We know that there's 10. That's what you want them to say. But ask them the question. Get them involved. It's not all directive. It should be very little directive. So how could we use this tool to represent this number that we have that's 12? Maybe they say they just want to write down the number 12, and they know how to write down the number 12, and they write it like this. And you're like, yay, hallelujah, good job. That is. When we want to write the number 12 down, that's what it looks like. But what does it mean? And they might look at you funny if you ask that. But here's what it means. Now, we don't want to show them, but say, let's see if you can use this tool to tell us anything about this particular number that you just wrote down. So if I use this tool, and I'm a kid, and I fill that up, and then I have these two left over. And it might be that just now they're like, oh, well, this 2, there's a 2 in here. There's a 2 in this number 12. So this 2, that 2 could mean these two red counters. But then there's this 1. 1 what? Because we know we have 10 in here. Well, 1, 10. It could be a tray. So this 1 could mean how many trays there are. Now again, these are all questions you can just ask them. If they say something funky, just keep going with it. Like, what do you mean by that? Or something like that, because it could mean something completely rational to them. But we need to ask them a question. So we do want them to get to a point. I'm just describing what these critical areas of focus are and giving you a couple ideas on how you might be able to do it. But the point is, we want them to understand that these numbers that are between 10 and 20 have something really special about them. They tell us that we have a set of 10, and then we have some of these extras. And we can pick out what those extras are just by looking at the number. So let's have another. I'm gonna use pennies. Now you can use pennies as counters in kindergarten, but it's preferred to not use other coins in kindergarten because we're just talking about ones right now. You will get to tens, and it is really nice that 10 pennies gives you a dime and 10 dimes gives you a dollar, and you will use those later. But in a kindergarten, if you do want them to count coins, just have them count a single denomination of coins. So in this case, a penny. So I'm going to ask this. So I have a pile of pennies here, and we want to know how many pennies there are. So again, your child or student might just count 1 to 1 and figure out how many pennies there are. If you have this tool available to your student, they may, and if they don't think it's wrong, but they may just go ahead and start putting them in here, because what do they know about this tray? They know that when this tray is full, they have a 10. So they know when we have a tray full like that, that's a 10. So we know we have this 10 and we have this 5 out here that isn't in our tray. So, and again, we just did one of these with the 12, but you would do several of those to get them ready and say, okay, well, we didn't count all of these together. We could say that we know that a 10 and a 5 is 15, and your child might know that. Great for that child. We could have a child that wants to still count these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We could learn from your child when they do that. What does that tell us about what your child knows and doesn't know? Well, don't think it tells us that only what he or she or they don't know. It doesn't tell us that. It also tells us what they know. So we know from the child who just counted all of this, we know that they have 1-to-1. We know that they know the order that numbers come when we say them. We know that child knows cardinality, which means that the last thing that they point to tells you the name of the set, which in this case is 15. So we know that your child knows those things. Those are really good things to know. We also know that your child doesn't know yet that when this tray is filled, it means 10. It's okay. That just means we use it a little bit more so that they get to the point where they're like tired of counting all of these and just figure out, well, every time I count a full one of these, it's always going to be 10. So I'm just going to start from 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. But we don't want to tell them that efficiency tool. We want them to figure it out. And the only way they're going to figure it out is by having to do it many, many, many times. And they'll get it's called utility. They'll get the utility of it themselves. They'll figure out, oh, it's so much easier just to say 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That's a lot easier for me. And whenever something makes it a lot easier for us, we tend to use that strategy. So here's another one. So we have, what do we know? We have this number 15. So they could have said the number 15, or maybe they counted them and then said the number 15. What do we know about this? Well, we have 5 pennies right here. So here's a 5 right here. So we know that these that don't make it into our set of 10, those are right there. And we know we have one what? Well, we have one of this whole thing, this set of 10. So that 15 then is a set of 10, and maybe they'll draw it like this. They might draw it like that, and they might draw this one like that, and that's cool. This is awesome. If you have a student or a child who does something like this and represents it using these symbols, awesome. Because what they'll do is eventually they'll come to realize that whenever they have this thing that's full, that means that's a 10. And this thing is just going to be those little ones that are left over. So eventually, this is what we'll end up with. I just did that in a few seconds. Don't do that with your student in a few seconds. We want them to make these kinds of connections. But these are the kinds of connections we want them to make. And you might say, well, my goodness, when I learned 15, I didn't have to do all this nonsense. When I learned my 15, we were living in a different world. Now we're living in a world where kids, students, young adults, old adults have to create. And they need to know these things. They have to have the understanding of what place value means. And that's really the intent of this first piece of the critical areas of focus. So that component is working with and gaining an understanding of the value of these special kinds of numbers that they work with in kindergarten that are between all these numbers between 10 and 20. Those are really special numbers, and we need to spend some considerable amount of time on that. All right, so the next piece is identifying, describing, and comparing measurable attributes. So what the heck is a measurable attribute? I just happen to, because I have a craft box in my house, I just happen to have these pipe cleaners. So I'm just going to cut some pipe cleaners. So I'll cut these pipe cleaners. You know that from my other videos, I also like to sometimes use spaghetti. Spaghetti is a really cool tool that you can use. So I'm going to have 2 pieces of spaghetti here. And also, I found some sticks outside. So I'm going to have these sticks that I found and use those. And you can find whatever you want. And the cool thing about this for kids is you can have them find things that one is longer than or shorter than the other. Okay, longer than, shorter than. So you can give them 2 pieces of spaghetti and say, make one that's longer than the other. You could give them the 2 sticks and say, make one that's shorter than the other. But the idea is you're using tools that they can find from around the house. Now, when you're looking at measurement, one of the important things is that the starting end, whether that's at the left or at the top. And again, either way, so you can look at length left to right or top to bottom. And we do want them to be able to do both ways, top to bottom, left to right. But have them look at that and tell you why is one longer than or shorter than the other. But when they're doing it with things in their own world and their own environment, it starts to give meaning to it. And this is an idea that they're going to have to use when they get into first grade. This whole idea of so when they get into first grade, then they're going to be talking about how much longer is it, how much shorter is it, things like that. So that's really just setting them up, making sure that they can have find some things around the house. They could find 2 shoes and tell us what's the longer shoe, what's the shorter shoe, and try to get them to start talking about things like that. The very last thing for this particular critical area of focus is classifying objects. So classifying objects, I have some stones here, and I colored some stones here. So classifying is an important aspect also for kindergartners, because we're going to have to be starting to kind of play with data a little bit. And if you play with data, you need to have some things that distinguish data one from the other. So in this case, if we just had all of these stones together, and I colored these green, have your student or child color them a different color if you want, and just put them down and say, okay, let's see if we can sort these somehow. So most likely, your child will sort them by color. That doesn't mean that's the only way he, she, or they could sort them, but it's one way that they could sort them. And you could say, okay, so how many green, or first of all, ask them how they sorted them. So how did you sort them? And it looks to us, clearly we sorted by color. But again, the more the student talks, the more power they have in their mathematics and the more confidence they feel as a mathematician. So how did you sort those? So, and be a little perplexed. How did you sort those? Well, these are the ones that I colored, and these are the ones I didn't color. Say, oh, okay. So now that you know their categories, you can say, well, how many green ones do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 green ones. Can you write that for me, you would ask? So 8. And then how many, now whatever they called these, if they called them not green, you use the word not green. If they called them not colored, you use the word not colored, whatever they use. So what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. We have 10 not green ones. Now, at this point, you could ask them, how many rocks are there? How many rocks are there altogether? That's not really part of this standard that we're talking about right now. We're talking about classifying them and being able to take this number of items and put them into their separate pieces. But we do want them to know, yes, there are some green stones. Yes, there are some not green stones. But there are also a collection of stones altogether. So, and they may look at this because of the teen number activity that we've done before, you could say, well, what do these mean? Like if we wanted to put these together and say how many stones there are, we have this 10 and we have this 8. How would you represent that? Now, they might push them all together and count them all over again. And if they do that, that's okay. They might start with this 10 because that's what they've learned in kindergarten, or that's where they are in their understanding, and then count on 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. If your student does that, don't freak out because they didn't know that they just put these together. It just means they got the idea that 10 means a set of 10, and they have the idea that they can add on. They just not yet. They don't know that they can just go straight to the number, and that's okay because that's what they're learning about right now. So they could also say, well, 10, we know that 10 is the way that I have my egg carton, I know that's an egg carton and an 8, and I know there's 8 stones outside of the egg carton. And again, if they're not at this level of abstraction, it's okay. But they could say, well, I know that 10 is an egg carton, and I know the 8 are the single ones, and that goes there. But the idea is not really to get them to tell you a certain thing. The idea is to get them to tell you their thinking. That helps you to learn what they know, and that is by far the most important piece. Because once you know what they know, then you know what question to ask. And notice I didn't say what to tell them next. What question do you ask next? Just play around with it. Have some fun with your kindergartner. Tomorrow I'll post the other critical area of focus for kindergarten, and next week we'll be working on one of the next grade levels. So if you have a particular grade level you'd like me to go through, please message us on our Facebook page, our Instagram page, or leave us a message on our YouTube channel or our YouTube page. Thanks, and have a great day. Go Bucks.